was just a young soldier, Hitler's bodyguard, not a politician. I saw everything and survived.
In 2018, scientists tested Hitler's supposed skull and discovered it belonged to a woman. In 2001, his personal valet revealed the dictator shook uncontrollably and begged for privacy in death.
The last witness to Adolf Hitler's final hours has himself died.
But in 2025, construction workers found a sealed letter behind a wall written by Hitler's last bodyguard, Rochus Misch. Inside, he confessed to things he spent a lifetime denying. Now it's exposed, and the man who claimed he knew nothing, turns out he might have known everything. Here's what that letter finally revealed. The proximity paradox. You know how every villain has that one guy behind the curtain? The one who never speaks too loudly, never steps too far out, but is always, always there. That was Rochus Misch. He wasn't a general. He wasn't a strategist. But when it came to Hitler, he was right there, in the bunker, on the phone lines, listening in on the apocalypse. And somehow, he walked away from all of it. Born in 1917 in Silesia, Rochus had no plan to end up next to one of the most infamous figures in modern history. His early life? Messy. Both parents died young, raised by grandparents. Germany was in pieces after World War I. The economy was trash, hope was non-existent, and chaos was pretty much normal. So when the SS rolled through with uniforms, paychecks, and promises of order, Rochus said yes. And just like that, at 20 years old, he was part of something way bigger than he understood. Within a year, he got bumped up. Not by accident, he was handpicked for the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. Basically, Hitler's inner security circle. Think Secret Service, but for a dictator. Most guys guarded doors. Rochus guarded phones. Encryption lines, communications, which meant when Hitler talked, Rochus heard it. When orders flew out of the bunker, he was the one patching them through. And here's where it gets weird. He swore he didn't know anything. Not about the camps, not about the gas chambers, not about the 6 million. According to him, the war happened one phone call at a time. And he was just connecting the wires. For decades, that was his story. Just doing my job. Which, if we're being honest, isn't new. Everyone close to evil says that when it's over. But then came the contradictions, the tiny cracks in the tale. When the film Downfall showed Hitler screaming in the bunker, tossing tantrums as Berlin collapsed, Rochus rolled his eyes. That wasn't the man I knew, he said. According to him, Hitler was calm, polite, even respectful. He described Hitler like a weird uncle with a tight schedule and strong opinions. And then, April 30th, 1945. That was the day the world officially ended for Nazi Germany. The day Hitler and Eva Braun locked themselves in that back room and didn't come back out. Rochus didn't hear the shot, but he was called in soon after. He said he walked into that bunker office and saw the scene. Hitler slumped forward, Eva beside him. Orders were followed. Bodies were wrapped, dragged upstairs, burned in the garden with gasoline. Because Hitler didn't want to be displayed. He wanted to vanish.
I wanted to see. I went over a few paces to the right, and there I could see how Hitler had fallen, and Eva Braun was next to him on the sofa.
And Rochus? He just kept working. He stayed behind, running the bunker switchboard, even after the leader of the regime had literally unalived himself in the next room. He stayed until the Soviets were practically kicking the walls in. But here's the part no one saw coming, because when the Soviets did finally break in, they didn't just grab Misch and toss him into a prison cell. They dragged him into something much darker: torture, loyalty, and the lie that lingered. So the Soviets stormed the bunker, expecting resistance. But what they found instead was something else entirely. A bunker full of pale men, burnt corpses, and one guy sitting at the communication desk like he was still on shift. That guy? Rochus Misch. They didn't waste time. He was arrested on the spot and dragged to Moscow because Stalin wasn't buying it. He didn't believe Hitler was dead. He was convinced the body burned in the garden was a decoy, a look-alike. And now he had the one man who ran the phones, who saw the bodies, who knew something. Misch was tossed into Lubyanka, the Soviet intelligence prison. It wasn't a place for answers. It was a place for pain. He was interrogated for 6 years straight. They broke his ribs, starved him, humiliated him, all for one question. Where is Hitler? Misch kept saying the same thing. He's dead. They didn't believe him. They threw everything at him. Sleep deprivation, solitary, threats of execution. He begged them to unalive him just to end it. They refused, because dead men didn't talk, and Stalin still wanted a headline. Misch never gave it to him. It wasn't until 1954, when Khrushchev signed off on a general amnesty, that Misch was finally let out. 10 years after Hitler's suicide, the Soviets stopped asking questions, just like that. And Misch, he went home, West Berlin. But instead of hiding or changing his name like so many others, he opened a paint and wallpaper business, just a quiet storefront. Back to civilian life like nothing ever happened. Except it did happen, and people knew it. So he started talking. He wrote a memoir, gave interviews, and every time he was asked about his role, he said the same thing. I did my duty. I was proud to serve him. And that's where this whole thing got uncomfortable. Because it's one thing to say, I didn't know. It's another to double down and defend the man. Misch insisted that Hitler never mentioned the final solution in front of him. He claimed the Holocaust was never discussed. That genocide just didn't come up in conversation. He said Hitler was respectful, that he treated staff well. But then others from the bunker started talking, and their stories didn't match his. Heinz Linge, Hitler's valet, had also been arrested by the Soviets. But unlike Misch, he described a completely different Führer. Nervous, twitchy, obsessed with appearance, unraveling by the hour. Linge said Hitler demanded that no one see him in weakness, that he wouldn't allow a public capture because he feared being paraded through Red Square like some circus prize. That's why he wanted his body burned, not just to avoid exposure, but to erase control from everyone else. Even in death, he wanted the last move. Linge also talked about the exact moment the corpses were handled, that it was him, Misch, and Gunshi who carried the bodies up to the garden, that they doused them with petrol, that they watched them burn. Misch never denied that. But what he didn't admit was everything around it. Because while Linge talked about Hitler's shaking hands, his dependency on sedatives, and his paranoia over imaginary traitors, Misch kept saying the same thing. He was calm, polite, rational. Two men, same bunker, two entirely different truths. And that fracture, that's where the Soviets started to crack everything wide open. Bones, burn sites, and the skull that wasn't his. So now there was a problem. One man said Hitler died like a calm soldier. The other said he went out twitching, paranoid, afraid of being humiliated. Same room, same scene, but the memories didn't line up. And right in the middle of that confusion, the Soviets. Because while Misch was still out there saying, he shot himself, I saw the body, the Soviets were saying, cool, but we need bones. So they started digging. The Smersh unit, basically Soviet counterintelligence, claimed they found jaw fragments and parts of Hitler's dental bridge near the Chancellery Garden. They called in Hitler's dentist's assistant and dental technician, and both confirmed it. Yep, that was his grill. It all matched. That was supposed to be case closed. But then came the skull, a small piece of bone found near the same site, preserved by the Soviets, displayed in Moscow for decades as the proof, the actual remains of Adolf Hitler. And then, 73 years later, scientists tested it. In 2018, French researchers took a good look. DNA analysis, bone density, biological markers. And the result? It wasn't a man. It was a woman. Just like that, the Soviet smoking gun went cold. The world's most symbolic piece of evidence? Not Hitler's. Probably not even close. Now there was a fake skull, a lot of burnt dirt, and a letter from Hans Rattenhuber, Hitler's chief of personal security, saying Hitler didn't just take cyanide. He swallowed the pill and ordered someone to shoot him immediately after, just to be sure. Western historians called that pure Soviet propaganda. They said it sounded like Stalin trying to claim ownership of Hitler's death, like a final punchline. But even if the story was bogus, the paranoia behind it was real. Stalin wanted absolute proof, and he didn't get it. So he made his own, which brought us back to Misch. Because while forensic teams and Soviet officials were obsessing over bones and bullet holes, he was out there downplaying the whole thing, saying there was no madness, no chaos, no clue that the world was falling apart around them. And that was where the dissonance got loud. Because how did someone live inside the epicenter of genocide and not absorb any of it? Not question it? Not even hear whispers through the wires? It didn't make sense. And then it got worse. Even his own daughter turned on him. Brigitte Misch, born after the war, found out from her mother that she had Jewish ancestry, confirmed by her grandmother. Her father never told her. Not once. She grew up, became an architect, and spent her career working on Jewish restoration projects in Germany. And when reporters came asking about her dad, she didn't defend him. She said, "My father never killed anyone, but he served a killer." That one line? It split the legacy in half, because the world had always seen Rochus Misch as the man who picked up the phone while history burned, a quiet witness. But now, he looked like someone who chose to stay quiet, and the silence started looking more like protection than ignorance. But all of that, all the interviews, the books, the press, that was before someone opened up a wall in 2025 and found something he left behind. And what that letter said, it was so shocking. The letter behind the wall. So it was early 2025, and there was a construction crew working on an abandoned apartment block just outside Berlin. The building was being gutted, pipes, drywall, insulation, all ripped out. Nothing unusual, until one guy pulled back a panel and found a metal container wedged between the studs. No label, no lock, just rust and dust. They opened it, expecting old tools or maybe a stash of war bonds. But instead, they found an envelope, yellowed, brittle, and on the front, a name written in that sharp, looping German cursive, Rochus Misch. Dated late 2012. At first, they thought maybe it was personal, a letter to a friend or maybe his daughter. But once the seal broke, everything changed. Because the very first sentence read, "I can't keep silent anymore." That one line flipped decades of history on its head. Because this wasn't a farewell. It was a confession. Over 5 pages, Rochus Misch admitted what he never dared say in public. He lied, in interviews, in his memoir, on live television. All of it, scripted. He said he kept the truth buried because he didn't want to destroy the myth. But here's what was real. He described bodies buried in remote forests, political enemies, witnesses, dissenters, executed and dumped under Hitler's orders, not whispered rumors. Misch claimed he saw it, that Hitler would sit behind glass during some of these executions, calm, watching. At one point, according to the letter, he turned to Misch and said, "Justice sleeps best underground." That one quote, it detonated across every major historical institute in Europe. Because it didn't just sound evil, it sounded specific, like something only an insider would have heard. And then came the kicker. Misch said that inside one high-security compound, they conducted poison trials, not in some camp, not across borders, right there. In Germany, they brought in prisoners, test subjects, fed them different toxins, took notes, monitored reactions, all while Hitler sat behind glass, observing the progression of death. Misch didn't say he gave the orders. He said he monitored the phones, logged timestamps, tracked communication lines. He called himself just a technician. But the world doesn't hand out free passes for proximity. Then came the part no one was ready for. One of Hitler's officers once gifted Misch a girl, young, frightened, maybe 14. According to the letter, she was told to stay quiet and obey. A few days later, her body turned up near the Berghof. The official story blamed enemy agents, but in the letter, Misch wrote, "That was a lie. She spoke too much. I believe Hitler ordered her death." He didn't report it. He didn't push back. He wrote about the nightmares, about hearing the screams years later, about one moment in particular, one he never spoke of on camera. May 1st, 1945. He described it as the single most dreadful thing he ever witnessed, the unaliving of the Goebbels children. Magda Goebbels had drawn all 6 of them into the bunker workroom. His workspace, as he later emphasized, dressed them in white nightgowns and gently combed their hair. Misch watched, fully aware of what was coming next. He recalled Dr. Stumpfeger handing the children what he called candy water, likely morphine, sweetened to keep them calm. He remembered how quiet it was, how deliberate, the children sitting around the table, innocent, unaware. He said little Heide, only 8, teased him before being led away. "Misch, Misch, du bist ein Fisch. Misch, Misch, you are a fish." Then they were gone. Magda returned alone. Pale, frozen. She said nothing, just sat down and quietly played patience, the card game, until Joseph came down to join her. They didn't speak. Misch later wrote that even in a bunker full of death, that was the moment that broke something inside him. But he never told the world. He sealed that truth behind a wall. Like maybe if no one saw the letter, the memories would disappear with him, but someone did find it. The letter was sent straight to the German Federal Archives. Experts ran tests, paper stock, ink composition, handwriting comparisons with documents never released to the public. It all matched. Every page, every word, every signature. And just like that, the world had to start over. Because the man who always said he was just a bystander had just admitted he stood closer to evil than anyone ever knew. But the most disturbing part wasn't just what he confessed. It was how he planned it. And that was where the letter took us. The silence was engineered. So now the letter's real, verified, cataloged, stamped by experts who wanted to prove it was fake and couldn't. Every test confirmed it. Misch wrote it. But that wasn't even the shocking part. Because buried in the final paragraph was one last admission. Not about Hitler, not about execution, about the letter itself. Misch explained exactly how he did it. He wrote that he timed it, waited until his final months when he felt death creeping in. He chose the building, an old property he once helped renovate after the war, one no one cared about anymore. He picked a room near the top floor where renovation would take the longest. Then, late one night, he returned. Alone. He brought tools, a flashlight, cut the drywall himself, slid the metal container between insulation and studs, then patched it all up. Clean, left no signs behind. He didn't want anyone to find it early. He didn't even want his family to know. The letter was never meant for them. It was for history. A delayed confession, one he was too cowardly, or maybe too loyal, to say out loud while breathing. And the timing? It worked. The building sat untouched for years. No tenants, no remodels, just dust. Until two workers with crowbars and a job stumbled into one of the darkest truths ever handwritten. And suddenly, a question hung in the air like smoke. Why now? Why confess anything after a lifetime of denial? Was it guilt? Legacy? One last chess move to twist the narrative in his own favor? Or maybe he just realized what history was becoming. Because by 2012, people were already softening. Documentaries framed Hitler as mentally unstable, not purely evil. Internet forums questioned the scale of the Holocaust. Some fringe historians tried to sanitize the regime with academic language. And Misch saw it happening. So maybe this was his way of throwing a wrench into the machine he'd spent his life defending. Maybe deep down he knew silence wouldn't save him forever. But still, he waited until no one could ask him why. The letter didn't fix anything. It didn't make him a whistleblower. It didn't wash the blood from his hands. If anything, it confirmed the worst. That Rochus Misch wasn't just a bodyguard. He was a witness, a participant, someone who saw, heard, recorded, and chose silence. He answered the phone for evil, and when it rang, he picked up. And now that silence is gone, because someone pried open that wall, and the world can't unhear what was written inside. So now that the truth is out, do we finally close the chapter on Hitler's last witness? Or does this letter open a door to even darker secrets we missed? What else is still hidden behind walls, waiting to be found? Let us know what you think. And if you want more stories that challenge what history told us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is just the beginning.